Hello, everyone. Welcome to this great webinar. I see you are joining us. We're going to let everybody join, and then we're going to start in a couple of minutes. In the meantime, welcome. My name is Tati. I'm the marketing manager here at Craft, and I will be the moderator for this evening. In the meantime, while we wait for everybody to join, would be great if you can tell us where you're watching this webinar from. I always ask this question because I think it's really cool to know, I don't know, where everybody is from and where is this community of product managers from. So yeah, I'm here with Jenny, who's our great host for this evening. She's going to be introducing herself soon. As I said, just a couple of minutes. And then we will be able to start. I just realized you didn't have enabled the possibility to chat. So now you are able to comment. So it's a great time to tell us where you're from. All right, we will wait one more minute and then we will start. I guess we have people here from the UK, from the US, from all over. We have a really, really interesting webinar today. So I hope you guys are ready. I hope you have your cup of coffees. One more minute and we will get started. All right, I think we're ready. So again, welcome everyone to the webinar From Chaos to Control, how data governance fuels product innovation. As I said, I am Tati, I'm the moderator for today. Just quick reminder, this webinar is being recorded, so we're going to be able to send you at the end of this webinar the recording, so you can share it, see it again. And yeah, at the end, we're going to have some time for questions, so make sure to save them. You can always at any time write in the chat if you have any comment, any questions, but we will try to save them for the end. And yeah, Jenny, if you want to introduce yourself and take it away.
Thank you, Tati. So hi, everyone. My name is Jenny Goldberger, and I'm a solution engineer at Craft. Let's jump onto a quick introduction of myself. So my role as solution engineer effectively sits between the worlds of product management and also kind of customer engagement. And I work very closely with customers to bridge the gap between their needs and also the solutions that the product has to offer. And I was a management consultant in the UK for quite a few years. And as such, I've gained some really interesting insights from working in product positions with like very varied customer bases. And this is for enterprises, kind of large and small, across sectors like financial services, government, healthcare, manufacturing, education, and even the charity sector. And as product managers, we are very accustomed to organized chaos, and we secretly love it, of course. But since data is the foundation of all of our product activity and decisions, we really need to lean into that cliche and acknowledge that data-driven decision-making is heavily dependent on good data governance. And today, I'd really love to walk through 3 core insights into how being intentional with your data governance from the top down can really guide you to better organize that product chaos and help your teams drive that innovation forward. And just to start off, kind of a really brief statistic for the group, only a whopping 19% of some surveyed organizations currently feel that their data governance processes exist and are actually very strong. The remainder is kind of a mix of ad hoc processes, a complete lack of structure or just complete cluelessness of what actually exists. And this reinforces that companies are still facing really big challenges around building practical and structured approaches to data governance, even though there are very clear and understood benefits of doing such a thing. So getting the approach right will really depend on a few key things. This will include the maturity of the organization, the willingness of your stakeholders and your champions to kind of get on board, and also the tools that you have available at your disposal. And this is just a bit of food for thought as we delve into the 3 core pillars of the presentation. This will start with the fact that there is no one-size-fits-all approach, and data governance, of course, is proportionate. It's not practical for us to kind of cookie cutter an approach to data governance, and it needs to be very tailored to the maturity of the product organization. So for any process change, not just related to kind of data governance and things like that, proportionality is very key. And whatever you implement needs to take into account the place and the environment that you're implementing it into. So in essence, if you're looking to kind of define an approach to data governance, it's important to understand where you are currently in your product journey before you start deciding how to build your foundations. And I'm a person of analogies and kind of real world examples. So I put one in here with the aid of AI tooling. On the right-hand side, you'll be able to see a useful and interesting image that I've created. And we're going to look at the concept of earthquake prevention for buildings kind of in countries and places that frequently experience seismic events. Japan's a useful example. And, for example, this country is very prone to earthquakes on a regular basis. And buildings in Japan are therefore built on these kind of specific foundations that move with and also absorb all of that seismic shock. And this protects people inside, but also kind of builds longevity and reduces long-term damage. If we apply this concept to product management world and kind of ways of working, we can see that how you build your data foundations and your infrastructure is incredibly important, especially if you're a scaling enterprise that's kind of still growing. And like we see on the right, if the product organization is continuing to feel and experience those seismic shocks, then it's really ideal to find a minimum level or a minimum viable level of data governance that lets you maintain the control as things move around you. But the inverse is also going to be relevant for those large, more stable organizations and enterprises, because here more governance and control will make sense when you're no longer feeling and experiencing the shifts that we see on screen. So real life examples, tech startups and scale-ups with very small teams will be changing day to day. And their processes are always kind of evolving. So implementing a really rigid data governance structure up front will make it really hard for those teams to try, test, fail, and continue to innovate. But if you find that kind of minimum level of data governance at the outset, you can go a long way in keeping teams aligned, but also kind of maintaining clean and clear reporting processes. It's all about kind of long-term scalability. And this can include upfront bringing structure around shared objectives and key results, prioritization matrices, or even kind of shared workflow stages. And these can also grow and adapt as your company scales. But then again, the inverse, that the same concept applies for companies that are already operating at size and scale. And here it may be useful to implement more stringent management practices around your data, or even align with things like scaled agile frameworks, because you may have really defined reporting structures, even influenced by regulatory requirements. Therefore, your minimum viable level of reporting or your baseline is now changed and it's greater than what it once used to be. So overall, it's really important to understand where you are on your product journey. And this is key to building a functional and sustainable approach to data governance that takes into account the maturity of your organization. Right. So secondly, our second theme is a bit of a fun one. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Similar in concept to you can invite your stakeholders to a governance meeting, but you can't make them sit down. And I'd love to shout out to artificial intelligence for this one. It demonstrates on the right-hand side just how important data quality is when you are asking an AI tool to create something for you. So of course, I provided some pretty poor instructions to kind of create something for the visual, and we produce this. So I think it reinforces what I'm trying to get across in our presentation. And of course, coming back to the theme, it's change management, a term that is so widely used and recognized. It does remain one of the biggest parts of the story when you're implementing new tools and approaches, especially with things like data. And within an organization that has kind of more ad hoc approaches to data governance, for example, everyone kind of doing their own thing, it's not really simple or easy to encourage and enact that change, even if you have the most persuasive and kind of effective senior leadership teams. It's still not an easy task. And I've seen a lot of this firsthand. So we've seen directives come from above where an organization now has a specific product, which is the strategic tool of the organization. And there's been a directive, users will now need to migrate by the end of the year without much lead time or without really much training and guidance. What do you think is going to happen in this environment? We're either going to find ways to entirely circumvent the tool, or they're going to find ways to encourage the kind of new product to act like the old product, whether it's adding fields to forms to mimic those old processes and kind of mimic and maintain old reporting structures. This, again, reinstills and creates that long-term data chaos. And this is in what would have been a really fantastic opportunity to baseline your data and their structures, and also be more intentional about how you'd like to measure things going forward. I will take a quick sip of my tea here because I have a sore throat. So the key issue here in kind of what I've seen and what you experience in a lot of these large organizations, some of them very legacy in the way they approach things. Users have not been guided on the what's in it for me. And they weren't kind of taken or accompanied on that journey with the stakeholder teams. And if you can't really locate your champions and win those hearts and minds early on, I do honestly believe that the best of tools are going to fail in adoption. And your data chaos will continue to persist, with half of your teams floating back to where they feel most comfortable, which unfortunately is Microsoft Excel in most of our experiences. And we know, of course, that this kind of practice is pure carnage when it comes to consolidating your data and your reporting, because everyone effectively becomes an admin in their own environment, and the data gets manipulated without any kind of central protection. So a single defined and kind of managed source of truth is really important. It helps users to converge around some kind of shared entity or shared perspective. And though, of course, we see on screen, process and change management is so key. Without a strong tool, it's going to be a lot harder. So this leads us into the final theme. And this is effectively, tooling is not a silver bullet. However, it is one of the most key enablers that there is. And a strong tool on its own really can't solve the problem. We can't just throw a product at the issue and assume that people will latch on and start doing things differently. But when you accompany a good tool with really effective change management, such a tool will go a long way in kind of building and instilling that culture of strong data governance and management. So the tools, whether they are product management, whether it's IT service management, project, or even like workflow management, all of these will have shared purposes in categorization, labeling, and kind of reporting of data. And in the product management world, where most of us will sit, we're interested in tracking the progress of our products, our epics, features, stories, all of these things, but also ensuring that we are working towards common goals that kind of sit outside of our day-to-day. Therefore, we're going to want teams to feel comfortable in their own ways of working, but at the highest level, maintain some kind of strong and holistic and unified source of truth that is consistent and shared across all of our stakeholders. And a real life kind of customer example that we see on a regular basis is prioritization. And across the product estate, we see that teams don't always use and share the same methodology for prioritization, whether it's large organizations or small. It honestly ranges between things like Moscow, your must, should, could, won't, RICE, value, effort, and even kind of finger in the air prioritization, where you just go with your gut, or whoever shouts the loudest in our experience. But for some teams, there will be intent to implement, a single shared framework for prioritization. But for others, they like to maintain their existing ways of working, especially as an organization matures. And a good product management tool will facilitate both of these ways of working, in my opinion. And we've really worked closely with customers to define flexible prioritization structures with some of those shared data components that kind of trickle down and cascade from those highest levels, which maintain structure but allows that flexibility. And effectively, we see that product management, it's not a single science. It's a very subjective, very evolutionary concept and really specific to the individual product manager. A bit why our product was created in the first place, which is for product managers by product managers. We are not all working in the same unified way. So the structure that we have built allows you to really flexibly work with your teams, but also work towards those common goals. So I'd like to throw the example on the right. It's just a high level structure of the Craft.io portfolio and workspace, kind of our own ecosystem. And what we have on the bottom is the day-to-day operations of your product managers, whether you're working in Craft.io, any other kind of workspace environment. Day-to-day, you will have some kind of functionality to manage your epics, your features, your stories, conduct your road mapping, do all of your capacity planning, all of that good stuff. These will, in the Craft.io world, sit within each of these workspaces where management of access is kind of coordinated. So in workspace A, we'll have a handful of users that relate to each other. They are all working on the same products, shared vision, shared perspectives. Whereas in workspace B, you'll have a different product altogether with a product manager who has a different approach. Of course, we would love everyone to have unified ways of working, but the beauty of product management is that product manager A and B will not have the same exact ways of working, same practices, same ethos. And we don't always want that. We don't want them to all be copy paste. It's important to have that personality shine and that kind of those individualized ways of working. But how do we ensure that A, B, and C, all of these workspaces, even though they're being unique and trying to add their own product management flair to their daily operations, how do we ensure we're all working towards the same goals? And this is where the concept of our portfolio comes in. Like a lot of product management tools out there, you will have the ability to aggregate a lot of your information. And at the portfolio, you are able to create things like custom fields, like required fields, and kind of consolidate a specific way of working, which then trickles down to each of those product managers below. And this is a really functional way of tracking what your teams are doing and giving them that structure, but you're also giving them freedom and flexibility to do things in the way that suits them. So effectively, the result is that product management teams and kind of development teams across the entire product lifecycle can all work in the way that suits them, that is legacy to them, and that makes them feel comfortable. But all of this can align to those shared governance goals in a really effective way. And honestly, in the end, it's clear that data governance, it's not just this kind of checkbox exercise. It is, in my opinion, one of the foundations of all of the decisions we make as product managers. Poor data going in, as we've seen with my AI experience, provides a really bad result. And without the structures, we're building on those shaky grounds, on kind of those lack of earthquake prevention, and we're constantly reacting instead of driving that meaningful change forward. But I do think with the right approach, you can kind of blend this chaos into clarity, and you can ensure that data governance kind of makes sense for your organization. And the primary aim of this is to make sure that your data governance experience doesn't end up as messy as my AI experience, because everything gets merged together and all of our stakeholders live in perpetual chaos and don't know what day it is. So I would like to avoid everyone going down this route if they can. And that's kind of the end of my the structure. Thank you for listening, and we'd love to open it up to the floor for some questions.
Thank you so much, Jenny. That was really insightful and really interesting. Definitely. So yeah, I invite you all to write your questions. We'll make sure we'll try to get to all of them. So yeah, let's see. Feel free to write down your questions. Okay, I have one first question for you, Jenny. What are some of the most common mistakes you've seen organizations make when trying to implement data governance for the first time? This is a really good question.
That's a really good one. I think I've seen it. I've seen it a lot. And when it comes to kind of organizations that are small, I guess, that are startups, whether you're trying to build kind of approaches at scale with you, or you're a large organization, I think the thing you find is people overcomplicate it. And I've seen organizations that try and kind of go into a project and build this like fully fledged approach for data governance. And I don't think it's fit for purpose. I think kind of stuff I've mentioned before about focusing on that minimum viable level of governance and kind of building on from there is quite key. And also not being clear on what you're measuring is a huge issue. I've worked in organizations where there are kind of ambitions to unify reporting and make it clearer, but there's lots of different kind of custom fields and no one really knows what the single source of truth is. I think they're trying to take on too much, and I think taking a step back and being really objective is a really good way to start. So that's kind of the key issues, key mistakes that we kind of see.
Great. Thank you, Jenny. I have a second question here. How can smaller scaling organizations with limited resources get started with data governance?
Oh, limited resources. Okay. One as well. I mean, we work in the kind of the tech world, and we know that we have small teams. So taking some kind of personal experiences from us as well, from working in small startups, I think, again, when you try and overcomplicate things, it gets a little bit messy. I think that kind of building something that can grow with you, that scales with you, something super lightweight. So don't try and kind of take so many different approaches and start throwing them all at all the problem. I think piloting a few specific, even if you're looking at creating a specific field on a form for people to actually plug in their data to, when it comes to data accuracy improvements, I think that is a good way to pilot, test it, get your feedback, work in a very iterative kind of communal way, like a lot of our agile teams are very accustomed to working in anyway, and then get that feedback and that buy-in from the beginning. I think that goes a long way. And of course, we see that long term, things scale, and when you're really small and you're growing, the dimensions of where you sit, again, that external environment will continue to change. So it may be in 6 months' time, you need to revisit, review. Maybe things change, maybe they don't work. That is the beauty of being a scaling organization. The same approach to data governance can be in the way that you do your product management, in my opinion.
Thank you. I think we have time for one or two more questions. So this is your moment. In the meantime, I have one question here. How do you ensure that data governance doesn't become a bottleneck for innovation? I think this is a good question.
It's a very good question. I think we see it a lot with governance for the sake of governance, or kind of like process improvement for the sake of changing things. We don't like change for the sake of change, of course. Yeah. But bottleneck for innovation, the way that we want data governance to kind of be an enabler, not a blocker, it kind of feeds back to that lightweight approach. So using those agile practices, kind of having those retros, not so much these really intense agile ways of working, but every 6 months to 12 months, kind of reviewing how data governance processes are working, whether we need to change things, start measuring differently, whether the reports that we're pulling are still relevant, and whether we're trending on the right content. This helps you, again, seek that feedback and actually speak to the teams that are interacting with your data governance processes. So I think that's an important way. It's like that continuous improvement cycle means that you're always going to be ahead of the bottleneck, in my opinion. And we've seen it a little bit with, some of the product improvements and enhancements that we're continuing to make on a regular basis, automation and making a product kind of work for you instead of the other way around. And this goes a long way. So it's having things like automated fields or certain values that can be, inherited from child and parent. A lot of these like database structures can be built, and in automating certain parts, you're not having these bottlenecks and having these issues appear on a regular basis.
Thank you, Jenny. Now somebody posted a question on the live chat for everyone, which is great. So the question from David is, what are some ways you've seen teams successfully tell this story to cross-functional stakeholders who are not as well versed in this world? I mean, why it's important to change behaviors now to influence possibilities in the future?
It's a really good one. When it comes to some of my experience, I find it's hard to successfully tell this story. I think those cross-functional stakeholders have worked across large government organizations who really don't understand why change is so key. A lot of people have worked in kind of similar roles for a long time, and they like the tools they have. It's a really difficult one. Again, it's applying it back to what's in it for them. Why change is so important. It's making it more relevant. If someone, in my experience, there are people who are responsible for reporting, and they're very structured in how they see things, and they don't necessarily like that the tool doesn't work for them the way that the old tool does. It's making it relevant to them, and it's honestly listening to some of their concerns and spending time with them. From my consulting days, we would do a lot of interviews, and it was a lot of workshops where you have a very diverse stakeholder base, and sometimes it's people shouting the loudest are heard, obviously, the quickest. But for us, I always made sure to pay attention to people who weren't so vocal, because a lot of the time, change is impacting everyone. We are humans, and the change element of things will hit the ego and hit the emotions very intently. And it's about listening to them and really understanding why they don't really want these changes to happen. And then once we understand, we can make it more relevant to them. And that's how you can tell that story of why change is so important. But in terms of the way that teams have successfully done this so far, it's just that it's having those champions as well dotted around that can, demonstrate the value of tooling, of process changes across all of the different projects I've worked on. It all starts from the ground up, but however, it's facilitated top down as well. It's a two-way thing, in my opinion.
Thank you so much, Jenny and David, for the question. I think, unfortunately, we are out of time, but I want to thank everyone for joining this webinar. If you have any more questions, you can always reach out to us. Here, Jenny shared her email with you, but you can also contact us through our website, or if you are already a customer, reach out to our experts. Jenny, thank you so much for this webinar. It was super interesting, insightful, and yeah, there's anything else you would like to add?
Nothing on my side. Thank you for your time, everyone. It's been a lot of fun. And yeah, great to meet you.
It was definitely fun, and we hope to see you all on our next webinars that hopefully will come very soon. And thank you so much, and have a lovely day or night, depending where you are around the globe.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Cheers.